NHS staff, who we know have worked absolutely tirelessly throughout the pandemic, say they are angry at the government's 3% pay rise offer.
It was, of course, an increase on the 1% pay rise that was proposed earlier this year, which was down 1% from the 2% that was originally promised. So it's kind of up on those two figures. But the Health Secretary says that it is showing the government's willingness to, quote, back the NHS. OK, let's talk to some guests here. We're joined by author Michael Rosen. He spent 47 days in intensive care fighting COVID, and he says he owes his life to the NHS. Associate Director of Nursing at King's College Hospital, Felicia Kwaku. Paramedic and GMB union representative Paul Turner. And we're going to start with critical care nurse Dave Carr, because Dave works in the very hospital where the Prime Minister was treated for COVID, and they clearly saved his life. So I guess you'd say, Dave, that you've kind of got skin in the game here. Did you feel let down by the Prime Minister when you heard it was going to be 3%? And if so, what were you expecting him to say?
Well, obviously, I can't identify anything to do with the Prime Minister's treatment inside my hospital, but I think as anyone that's had COVID should recognises the value of what the NHS did, not just us in critical care, but the entire NHS family. Let down is an understatement. We feel absolutely gutted by the fact that the NHS isn't being backed by a substantial pay rise. And I want to make this absolutely clear. It's not just about pay, it's about pay for us personally. It's about investing in the NHS so that the NHS can deliver its core services. And what we've seen is, two waves of COVID. We were already short-staffed. I think there's 40,000 nurse vacancies in England alone before the pandemic. We've gone through those two waves. We're now expected to, drive down the waiting lists, look after this country's population and get their operations done. And we've got an imminent third wave. And there's no two ways around this. Unless the NHS is invested in, unless our work is recognised and the value of what we give to society in keeping people well, I think there's an existential threat to our ability to deliver core services. Personally, I'm absolutely gutted. We've worked so hard. And I know Felicia on your panel. I trained her years ago. We've all worked really hard in the NHS family, and I think it's a real slap in the face, a real insult to us.
Okay. Well, we'll come to Felicia in a moment. Of course, the Health Secretary doesn't see it that way. They see the fact that they've gone from 1% to 3% as being a recognition and showing that the government's willingness to back the NHS. Let's have a look what Sajid Javid had to say.
I'm sure that this pay rise will make a real difference to people's lives, not only putting more money in their pockets, but showing them how much we value and respect their incredible contribution to our nation. Thank you to all my NHS colleagues for everything that you do.
I suppose you could say that words are cheap, but then again, it is above what they said that they would give you, that they guarantee they would give you. Felicia, can you see any benefit at all in the rise up from 2% to 3%? Or do you feel that you've been slapped in the face as well?
I do feel, good morning to you both, and good morning to my fellow colleagues. I do feel that it's a travesty. We've seen some modelling by the London Economic Consortium, and they show that since 2010, 2011, that pay for NHS healthcare workers has lagged behind inflation subsequently. So the pay award or pay proposal of 3% is insufficient. The Royal College of Nursing have also done some modelling, and that shows that the actual pay award should be around 12.5%. So this pandemic has really had an impact, and I echo what Dave Carr has said. Nurses and other healthcare workers, they've put their lives on the line. We've lost many nurses. Nurses and midwives have been the highest discipline of colleagues that have actually died during wave 1 and wave 2 of the pandemic, and they're still dying. So, the nation's wealth is the health of its citizens and its workforce, and we need proper investment, because of the extraordinary effort that all healthcare workers and professionals made during the pandemic. So therefore, we deserve an extraordinary pay award as well.
In a sense, a lot of people would say that it is an extraordinary pay award because, and I'm only quoting the facts here, the police aren't getting a red cent in an increase this year, neither are teachers. Lots of public sector workers aren't getting any extra money at all, and you are getting 3%. What would you say to people who say, well, you are being treated as an exceptional case?
I would say I would say, well, we've had death in service during the pandemic. I would say that we have a significant vacancy rate, which David has already alluded to, and I would also say that if you recognise our value, then you'd want to keep us. You'd want to keep nurses, midwives, and other healthcare professionals within the profession. You don't want to lose them. We have a very significantly traumatised workforce, and actually many health care professionals went into hardship during the pandemic as a result of some of the economic impact. So actually, we're a jewel. We're a jewel within this within United Kingdom, and we deserve a pay rise according to that.
Paul Turner, I don't think there's a person on the street, if you ask them, that wouldn't agree that nurses and other healthcare workers deserved every penny of a pay rise as a priority for what the government could afford. I suppose, though, you're also a paramedic as well as a GMB union representative. I suppose, though, what the government would ask you is, we are £2 trillion in debt as a nation. It's slightly above inflation at the moment, although inflation is going up and up and up and is expected to go up to 3.7. So therefore, it's going to be above that very, very soon. But they have to balance the books and they have to make sure that the economy stays afloat. There are people in the private sector without jobs. There are people in the public sector that aren't getting pay rises, as Richard highlighted. What should they do and what can they do?
I think, firstly, thank you for having us on the screen, because it just gives us that opportunity to say what we believe is right for NHS workers. And when we look at that particular question, it's very difficult to answer. And that's because we're here to campaign for NHS staff. And I fully support your police, your fire. They all deserve pay rises, including social care. Our care workers on minimum wage. But what we're here to talk about is the NHS, and that's what I'd like to focus on. And as my colleagues have already alluded to, the recruitment and retention within the NHS is really at bleak moments. And what we need to do is invest into the NHS to retain those members of staff. I can honestly say, in the ambulance service, because the NHS isn't just hospitals and nurses and doctors. I'm a paramedic. I'm out there in the field on my own with my colleagues. So the NHS is a huge family. It's not just focuses on hospitals and nurses and doctors. We've got to look at the whole of the NHS and we've got to invest. And investment comes by your workforce. If I tell you now that the NHS ambulance services aren't sticking to the response times because we are under-resourced and underfunded. So if you call an ambulance now, the chances are it's not going to come there within the set times by this government. You're probably going to be waiting a significant amount of time. And when I talk about significant amounts of time, it's not an extra minute on the current standards. You're probably looking at half an hour to an hour. Some of the response times that we're running to at the moment are well above 30, 40 minutes.
Well, that's very worrying to hear. That's very concerning to hear, Paul.
And that's because we are massively, and I cannot stress this enough, massively short of staff. We haven't got enough people to man the vehicles and the demand that the public require.
All right, Paul. Can we just talk some Turkey here? In your trade union role, you've been offered 3%, which is 1% more than the government initially pledged, but they have listened to the advice and they've offered you what they've been recommended to offer. You want 12.5%, which you don't need me to tell you you're not going to get. Just cut straight to the chase. What would you settle for?
Well, that's for the members to decide. What the members want is a real term pay rise. We've talked about the 3%, fantastic, and it is above what others are being offered. However, the inflation of this year is 3.7% approximately. So actually, it's another pay cut of 0.7%. So we're not going to see a pay rise.
No.
And if you look at, I can only talk for my council tax because I know what it's gone up by. That's gone up by 5% compared to last year. So already I'm 2% behind, even on council tax. So we're not keeping up with the cost of living.
All right. Well, let's finish. Sorry to cut into you, but there are four of you, and we want to get you all in. Let's finish with Michael Rosen, the writer, who, as I say, Michael, you spent almost 50 days on a ventilator, fighting COVID. Clearly, you owe everything. You owe your life, everything that you are, to the NHS. How do you feel this morning about the 3% offer?
Totally agree with all three members of your panel. They must have it. I mean, not only was my life saved, but of course tens of thousands of others, and under the most incredible conditions. I mean, in my intensive care ward, there were 11 bays, but there were 24 of us in there. They were under the most incredible pressure. I was getting 24-hour care, with no questions asked. Look, there's me in my grotty days. I 2-3 times my life was saved. And more than that, they taught me how to stand up. They taught me how to walk in the rehabilitation hospital, and indeed came here, district nurses and so on, to deal with my tracheostomy scar and so on. So, I owe everything to them. And we have to be careful with all this stuff about the money. I mean, you cited some figures there, Richard, about trillions in debt. But this is a country that issues its own currency. It isn't as if there's a purse and sometimes there's money in it and sometimes there isn't. There's a very particular thing takes place between the government and the Bank of England, and no one's knocking on the government door saying, give us our money back. They're very happy, whoever it is holds our bonds. Very happy with the fact that the country pays interest on whatever that is, and the country issues currency, sterling. It's held by other people. So let's be quite clear about that.
That's true, Michael. But of course, there is economy, isn't there, and economics involved. If you start printing your own money, or if you start getting into big debt.
We do print money.
Yeah,
no, we do actually print money, though.
We do. You're right, but that could have an impact, as we've seen in the 70s, of when things could go awry. So you can understand the Chancellor trying to look very cautiously at that. Can I just ask how you're doing? You look great. I know it's been a long haul, but how's the progress?
It's amazing. Yes, that's right. I mean, it's a year later now. I've lost most of the sight in my left eye, and virtually all the hearing in my left ear. I get dizzy sometimes. But my strength is the thing I work on, so I do weights and I go for walks. So I do a bit of that.
Well, many congratulations. It's good to see you very much on the track back to health. And, Kate, I want to ask you, actually, as almost a fifth member of the panel. And I'm not going where I shouldn't go here, because you discussed this on air earlier on this programme. People may not have seen it. But obviously, there's your Derek. And, his life absolutely saved by the NHS. Yeah. You identified with what Michael Rosen said there. How do you feel?
Well, you couldn't, if it was up to me, you couldn't pay them enough, because it's absolutely extraordinary what all members of the NHS did. But nurses particularly, you know how much their detail, their spotting, and it's not just, as one nurse very earlier on said, you're the first people you see as a visitor. Of course, there were no visitors. They were having to get their head around technology so that people could talk to them. And it's actually the detail in a critical situation like that, with a virus that nobody knew at the point when Derek got sick, the impact it was going to have, the detail of blood pressure and cell count, a lot of that is all passed to the nurses and very much on their shoulders. And it's getting that right that makes all the difference, and knowing when to call in the big consultant and work on it. So I can't say enough. Of course, they should get more, but it is also a difficult job for a government to work out how to balance and go forward and deal with the tax rises that we might all have to face.
I think you do incredibly well keeping your journalist's hat on in a situation that you're so deeply immersed in on a personal level. Yeah. You're still able to step back from it and ask straight journalistic questions.
Well, and nurses and doctors are still very much involved in keeping Derek going now.
Of course.
So, the job is not done, and we want to make sure there's enough of them there to keep going.